All right, here we go. We now have 31, make that 32 people, 34 in the session. It keeps going up. This is wonderful. Wow, it's been a very long day, but you know what they say, save the best for last, right?
I've never heard that.
Oh yeah. So
this
we're
is not
gonna
a competition.
start.
Not a competition. All right.
What was that?
It's not a competition.
What? I'm sorry, what?
Not a competition.
What?
Yeah, go on.
So I'm going to start off. I'm going to do the intro, and then we are going to just, rock into this.
I'm just going to put this here. Bakari said he's going to make me cry, so.
I hope so. We'll see. So here we go. You know how you meet that first best friend at summer camp? That's Stephen Shedletzky, or Shed. Like, seriously, guys, I'm not kidding. It might also help that, he looks like and sounds like one of my best friends, Rory. So, we kind of have that, which explains why our pre-interview spanned 2 half-hour blocks over 2 days, which I love. And we still have so much more to talk about, including his grandfather, Benjamin, affectionately known as Zadie. And I mentioned Zadie, a Holocaust survivor, because of his impact on Shed's life, which in turn is going to be an impact upon our lives through what you are about to hear. I'm going to start this at what Shed calls defining moments. For Zadie, I was hiding from Nazis at 23 years old, the same age that Shed questioned his life. The first big day of Shed's first big job was seeing 1,000 people being laid off in a merger. And as a result, transparency became important to him, just as he learned the skill of networking, value of relationships, importance in having a vision, and the why. To answer that, podcaster and lead igniter and head of brand experience at Simon Sinek, Stephen Shedletzky. How was that?
That was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
You had me. I'm moist.
Okay.
Very kind. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. What do you want to start off with? What do you want to say?
Well, how's it going? What's up? How's the past couple days been? What have you learned?
Learned a lot. Well, okay. So let's talk about this. Maximizing employee engagement in a virtual world. This is where we are right now, as we can see, which is why, we're having this virtual instead of in person. But we are slowly starting to transition back into being in person and doing things. And here's what's going to happen. In maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years, people are going to forget about the concessions that we made, because we're going to go back to being comfortable, because this is what happens until we're reminded of it and have a, COVID Remembrance Day. This is reality. This is what's going to happen. What do you implore us to continue to take with us for the betterment of the life and human experience
of this past 15 months or whatever it is?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things are opening up, but the conversation I'm having with people is, it isn't a return to normal.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't necessarily a new normal. I think it is a next normal.
Next normal.
I can't even predict. We're seeing good things. We're seeing advancements in people being able to congregate. I'm just not yet ready to hang my hat on it. Mm-hmm. There are also defining moments in generations, like if you grew up in the Great Depression, you see your toothpaste as like something to like squeeze every little ounce of, because you're miserly, because that's when you came of age.
Mm-hmm.
I look at my 5-year-old who talks about sanitizing, washing hands, wearing masks, keeping distance from people. And it's, this has been 15 months is more, now that's 25% of her life. So, I think what COVID has taught us, for anyone who thinks that they're in control or there's certainty, this has been an extremely intense period that shows you there isn't. But I think any feeling of security, or I can predict the future, is just a narrative in your head. And so, I did a fun exercise with a friend of mine, Sasha Strauss, who said, define yourself pre-COVID, define yourself during COVID, and then define yourself post-COVID. So if I'm really honest, like pre-COVID, I defined myself a little bit too much by how many aeroplane miles I had. I was into that.
Is that being selfish or self-absorbed? Because I was the same way.
It's gamified, but it's something I paid attention to. Mm-hmm. And it came at sacrifice, leaving my family, came with guilt. But there were aspects of it that were a lot of fun. During COVID, I defined myself by these things, which are blue light glasses. And if I'm on too early in the day for too long, by 3 o'clock, my Zoom headache begins. And then, so now post-COVID, which could be this summerish, could be the fall, could be winter, or we don't know. Like, this thing is still morphing. We're going to need a booster vaccine. Maybe it's just part of the cocktail now. And like, make no mistake of it, this is, George Carlin has a really morbid but hilarious 8-minute stand-up bit on like, save the planet? Are you kidding me? How about save the people? The planet's fine. It's the people who are messed up. And we are. And we're living outside of our comfort zone. We're a tribal species. We're supposed to be living in tribes of 100 to 150. Like, the reason you and I get along, we just met last week, is because we share values and beliefs. We've had different upbringings, but we share values and beliefs. That's why we hit it off. And so, I think, I don't know where I'm going with this, but just this notion that I'm not banking on anything being taken for granted, or being like, oh yeah, things will be back to normal, or there will be a new normal, or the next normal come. I think it'll be an evolution of what are the next normals. We'll see. But what's fun is what we do and how we show up may change, but our why can remain constant. The one thing, regardless of change within our careers, our lives, or our organizations, there are certain things, certain intangibles that can remain the same. At Simon Sinek, we're about a more inspired, safe, and fulfilled world, and we've pivoted how we've brought that to life. And that's fun and exciting for me. And it's a stake in the ground that I can always return to, no matter how messed up, how uncertain, how much change. I can always come back to that. How can we use this opportunity to create a more inspired, safe, and fulfilled world?
And, I'm going to be, to the audience, I'm going to be asking questions, but I implore you all to, chime in on the Q&A, raise your hands as well, and we can bring you on stage. Referring or getting back to bridge the culture gap, just kind of bear with me for a moment. And I'd like for you to put this into perspective and bring this back. So for my fellowship, I'm a 2020, 2021 Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Fellow. So for my project, I'm taking a look at the effects of COVID-19 isolation. One of the subjects is Indigenous American. And one of the things that we talked about and that he shared was something that just completely blew my mind, how the message to helping stop the spread of COVID is to wash your hands, and wash your hands regularly. If you go to reservations, which in the States, it's where Indigenous Americans typically primarily live. And, going back to what you said about, being in tribes of 100. On these reservations, I did not know there is not steady, ready access to running water. So when you have a message of wash your hands regularly to a group of individuals who don't have that, then, what do you do? How do you do that?
So when talking about bridge the culture gap, I think there's a macro societal component, which you're hitting on, which is very important. And there's also a micro, inside of an organization. So, inside of an organization, my experience is there's often a delta between what senior leaders think their culture is and how their people actually experience it. And I think the greatest leaders, regardless of the size of the organization, work very hard to close that gap, to get curious, to be humble, have humility. There's nothing worse than saying, my door is open, I want to hear your opinion, but as soon as you tell me your ideas or opinion, I'll make your ideas, opinion, and feelings wrong. I'll tell you you're the problem. That's toxic positivity. So that's on the organizational culture piece, which I'm delighted to speak more of. What you're speaking to as well, people say, COVID was the great equalizer. No, it wasn't. There's still too much oppression and division. And we've seen it locally in Toronto here, where the people who are at most risk are lowest income, have to go to work, go to the front lines. And so while COVID has impacted everyone, isolation, well-being, there are certain populations that it has impacted more, and it's the same populations that we've been impacting through systemic racism, oppression, since the inception of this part of the world, since coming over here and saying this is ours now. And the George Carlin reference as well, because it applies to this in terms of occupying North America, is we aren't owners, we're renters. Like human being, there's a hubris of humanity, which is part of our strength, but there's an ego that this is our home. We don't own it. We have a timeshare, and the way that we're treating this timeshare is with an expiry date in the way that we're treating it. And the earth will continue after us. Hopefully we'll stick around for a long time, but it might become inhabitable based on us accelerating that. And by the way, if and when we go and populate Mars, the same issues we've had with humanity here will replicate there. And we'll still draw upon visionary leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., who put into wonderful words a world in which we're evaluated by the content of our character above anything else. We'll still need to be reminded by that, because we're human, and we have, once we grow too big, we can't scale. Like, we're just not good at scaling leadership, and like, I can't have a relationship with 3,000 people because of Dunbar's number, right? We're still this tribal species. So, I think on the macro, COVID has really hurt populations that have been hurt for decades, and then on a more micro, I think there's a gap between what leaders think their culture is and what it really is, or how their people experience it. Because leaders can't say the culture here is great. You're not allowed to say that. That's, just as leaders aren't born or made, they're chosen. They're chosen by their people based on their behavior, which means leadership isn't a title, it's behavior.
That leads to my next question of, being the head of brand experience, how can we curate the best brand experience for people in our own circle?
So first and foremost, I think we need to know what we stand for and put it into clear words, and have those words mean something. I mean, this is the value of scripture, by the way. We have scripture and religion such that we can say to an ideal, this is who we are. And we use stories and fable because we're a stories and fable species. And then it's a constant activity of continue, stop, start. What are the things that we're doing that are wonderful representations of who we are and what we believe? What are the things that are in violation, which means we need to have a good adult, mature conversation to dig in and make some real change? And then what are the things we want to start that are wonderful representations of who we are and what we believe? And this is not an event, it must be a ritual. We must constantly, culture evolves, and if we don't pay attention to it, it'll take on a life of its own. Culture equals values plus behavior. It must actually be lived. It can't just be plastered onto the wall.
But Shed, digging in and making that change, it's not easy. I mean, think about change on like the simplest level of changing our diet. If we have to say, all right, look, no more donuts or no more cookies, and Craig's Cookies just moved in right down the street from me, you can't be serious.
Mm-hmm. So the two most powerful human forces are hope, optimism, and accountability.
Hope, optimism, accountability.
I would put hope and optimism into the same bucket. Hope and optimism is the belief that tomorrow can be better, and that we have an ability to do it together. That's the accountability piece too. If you need any hope, optimism infusion, I welcome that you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I would invite that as required reading for anyone who wishes to live a life of meaning and purpose. I think it begins with a Nietzsche quote of, "You can overcome anyhow with a big enough or important enough why." And from someone whose grandfather's a Holocaust survivor, that book certainly resonates. So there's a difference though between hope, optimism, and toxic positivity, where we can only have rose-colored glasses and we deny the experience of being able to sit in and talk about the hard stuff. We can talk more about toxic positivity later if you want. But this notion, I mean, even for us now, there are many things that are hard with the current time, but still believing that tomorrow can be better. There are still tomorrows. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, whether I can see it now or not. It's just an optimistic belief that life is worth living. This is still worth pursuing. The other is accountability, which is, I mean, there are products made for self-discipline around getting a cookie jar that locks for 40, like, this is ridiculous, but we need it, right? But I think part of the trick of being human is, it's the African proverb, to go fast, go alone, to go far, go together. Mm-hmm. And so I could say to you, hey man, don't go to Craig's Cookies for the next month. You in? And you're like, nah, 6 months. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I make a commitment to you. And then we check in every Sunday night. And we're honest with each other. Mm-hmm. And they're like, shit, I went. And I'm like, it's okay, man. I got you. You're allowed to slip up. This is the key to Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the key to getting, this is step 12, service to another. And so I could tell you, I've been trying to lose these 10, 15 pounds for the last 10, 15 months. Not much progress. But, I could say to you, tomorrow morning, I'm waking up before my kids wake up. I'm going to go for a run. Yeah, I'm good. Like, I give up on myself multiple times every day, but better than giving up on myself is keeping up commitments to another that I care about. I have a buddy that I speak with almost every week. He's my leadership, fatherhood, accountability partner buddy. His name is Matt Todd. And if he's like, I'll call you 5:43 a.m. I got my running shoes and shorts on, I'm up. And I'm not up for me. I'm up for him. And so when it comes to change, I think hope, optimism, and accountability are the most powerful human forces that we know, that we have.
Wow. Let's get to a question. This is from Christopher Martinez. Hi, Stephen. Thank you regarding Dunbar's rule. How can large organizations, larger than 150 plus, create those tribal connections amongst their people? Any initiatives you've come across that have been successful?
Yes, great question, Christopher. So the answers are good leadership and good systems. So I'll give you a real example of this, and then talk about leadership development. So there's a company called Gore-Tex that makes puffy coats, like Gore-Tex coats. Mm-hmm. So, and this Simon writes about this in Leaders Eat Last. Dunbar's number is that we can maintain about 150 stable social relationships, right? Which means if I were in a coffee shop and Bakari walked in and I'm like, hey man, join me, that's a stable social relationship. If I'm just like, hey, like we're acquaintances, I know you, not a stable social relationship. Number of Instagram followers, not a stable social relationship. And so some of us can do up to 250, some of us 100, but the median is 150. And coincidence, I think not. You go back to the origins of our species, we lived in tribes of 100 to 150. So though the context and the environment around us has changed, our wiring hasn't. And so Gore-Tex figured this out the hard way. So they became quite successful quite quickly, and they had a factory that wasn't operating at complete capacity. But once their demand went up and they wanted to meet with supply, they brought in a second overnight shift. And then all of their key performance indicators, quality, morale, efficiency, speed, number of errors, like all of them went the wrong way. And the reason was, they figured out, was because if I'm now working different shifts and I'm working next to someone that I don't have sufficient relationship to, if I see that they're making a mistake or they're doing something that annoys me, I'm less willing to make an intervention, to make an improvement, because I don't have relationship with them. It's intimidating to go up to a stranger. But if I'm working with someone that's on my team and I'm like, stop chewing your gum so loud, or you could be doing that better, right? Relationship is a foundation of accomplishment. And so now Gore-Tex, as soon as they make a factory or an office, as soon as they reach 150, they just build a new one. Makes zero sense on their balance sheet, but it's their secret sauce. So they've actually created communities on their factories and on their campuses. So that's one example. But the other is just good leadership. Part of the issue with leadership is we promote people, typically, who are good performers. They're responsible, they're often type A, high controlling, they take charge of their own results. And we say, hey, you're good at your job, you're getting good numbers, whatever it might be, want a promotion, more responsibility, more money. Who says no to that? And then all of a sudden, you're now responsible for the people who used to do the job that you were the best in the room at. And the typical response is frustration. They're not good at the job. I'm way better. And you start to work 2x harder. Instead of, really the role of leadership is to not fish more, but to teach people how to fish. And so when we promote people and move them into roles of leadership, we have to make sure that they know what they're signing up for. You're no longer fishing. You're now responsible for teaching people how to fish, which, by the way, is the most fulfilling work there is. Seeing a human being grow, just ask any parent. It's the best work there is. It's hard and it takes patience, but it's the best work. And so inside of organizations where there's more than 150, we need to create chains. It needs to spread. I mean, the number of executive leadership teams I've met and worked with, Bakari, that are high trust and high performance, many. I've also seen some that are not. But the great ones know that it doesn't stop there. The great ones know, and the senior leaders are very clear. We do this for each other, not for free. We do this for each other such that you do it for your team, and you do it for your team, and you tell them that they do it for their team, and you're here to support them, and we're here to support you. That's how leadership scales. It doesn't. It's one person at a time, one team at a time. We aren't a species that can scale. Leadership can't scale. It's a human endeavor, which means it's messy, which means it's inefficient, but by heck, it is worthwhile and it is needed.
Shed, I had not thought about Viktor Frankl in years, But the funny thing is, I spent so much time basically just doing this as a mantra. I can't remember what he said about meaning. I think it goes something along the lines of whatever you do with meaning.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, meaning. I would link meaning and fulfillment close together.
Mm-hmm.
Is there more to that on meaning, or you're pointing out that like meaning matters?
No. I was pointing out that meaning matters, and for me, that became, part of my everyday for a while. And to put it in perspective was, I started doing that when I got into news, because every day we would work on, you wake up and it's a grind, it's physical. You're meeting people a lot of times at their worst, and you have to get them to trust you to share their stories. But then, there are other times when you have to share other stories that are not exciting, but you have to, everything that you have to do it with meaning. And that sort of gave me motivation to at least try to put that 100% in every day.
Yep.
And not only every day, but each story that, I was assigned. If there's a day where I'm working on 3 different stories and you want me to put 100% in each time, it would be easy to say, F you, I'm just going to go out and get it done. Just do it. But then when you hold yourself accountable to that meaning aspect, you become more attached to the people. So how do you also maintain that in, a larger environment?
Oh, that's good. Well, I mean, good leadership is good here as well. So I've a colleague of mine is David Marquet, who wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, which is about really, and if you've not yet read this book, I highly recommend it. Marquet became captain of a U.S. nuclear-powered sub in 1999. And the U.S. Navy in the late 90s was very hierarchical, and it was grained into you that if you were a good captain, you'd have a good ship, but if you were a great captain, you'd have a great ship. The responsibility was all on your shoulders. And so Marquet was given orders to become captain for the first time for USS Olympia. And he studied for 52 weeks to become a great captain, know every crew member, all of their history, knew everything about the ship such that he could be the authority on whatever was needed. But 2 weeks before he was to take command, his orders switched, and he was now captain of the USS Santa Fe, a totally different ship. It was a newer ship, and it was the worst rated performing ship in the entire fleet of the US Navy. And he had spent 50 weeks preparing for one scenario and then had 2 weeks to scramble for a new one. And he learned the need of true empowerment and delegation, because if he didn't, people would die. So he learned this because he shouted an order during a drill that was a wrong order, but his second in command still barked it. And he said to his second in command, "Why did you give that order?" To which the second in command, Seaman Jones, said, "Because you ordered it, sir." He realized that his people were following him blindly. And so he became obsessed with moving authority to where the information lived. So when it comes to empowerment, he viewed it as the role of a leader is to give their control away. But you can't just go about it willy-nilly. You can't just go out handing control away, because when you allow people to make mistakes, that's great so long as they're making a mistake of punching a bullet hole in the ship above the waterline. You can repair that, right?
Yeah.
So A quick example of this was the junior officer who is in charge of supply chain, what materials to bring on board, came to Marquet before deployment on a 15-month deployment and said, "Sir, here's a form. You need to tell me what type of rice to bring on board." And Marquet's like, "Are you kidding me? I don't need to spend my time on that." And the junior enlisted officer said, "Yes, you do. It's on this form. Need captain's approval. Tell me what rice to bring on board." And so Marquet took out his pen, signed the form, and said, "Your choice." This was the biggest decision in this young sailor's career. It was rice. Like, I've never heard of anyone leaving the Navy because they brought basmati on board instead of jasmine. But to this young sailor, it was the hugest decision. What if they pick something I don't like, was his response. Marquet said, "You got this." And so Marquet realized that in order to give away control, he needed to instill clarity of what is success and competency, that his people had the skills, strengths, attributes to be successful in their role. So clarity is, we know what success is. This is vision in the context of a submarine, crew safety, and don't let the enemy go to where we don't want them to go. And sometimes we're actually willing to sacrifice our lives if it's going to save more lives. That's clarity. And in the context of your organization, clarity may be different. On the competency side, it is both the technical skills and the human skills. People call them soft. Do not call them soft. They are hard. Confidence, care, empathy, attributes, human attributes, these are very important. And quite oftentimes when you're a leader, you have someone who doesn't yet believe in themselves, but you know they can do it. Or sometimes they need more training, whether it's technical skills or human skills, like confidence or care, empathy. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question head on, but this notion that, motivation comes from within. That's why I irk when people call me a motivational speaker. No thanks. I think it's our role. It's the role of us as leaders to find people who are motivated by the cause of our work, of our organization, and who are in the right seats and are using their strengths, their natural strengths, of which we all have strengths, every single one of us, whether we're aware of them or not, because we can be blind to our own strengths, but that we can cultivate and use our strengths to contribute to something we care about. And this is meaning, this is fulfillment. And it's really the purpose of life. Like when we're done with this thing, and we reflect on it, we don't talk about the title in our business card or the white ticket sponsor, if we drove a Tesla or not. It's, was I a good parent? Was I a good friend? Was I a good family member? Was I a good leader? Do I leave the people around me better than when I found them? That's how we evaluate ourselves. So instead of waiting to ask ourselves those questions at the end, do it now. I came up with a crazy idea. I was taking a leadership development program years ago, and we were supposed to create and simulate a workshop experience. And so I thought of this crazy idea of renting a casket, putting someone in the casket, and closing it to have them reflect on as if it's the end of their life, and did they do it right? Now, the person that I was working with thought that was a crazy idea, more out of her fear. But I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, imagine you could do an experience, which I'm like, all right, dude, like, hop in here. I'm going to close it out. What are they going to say at your funeral? Let's go. Mm-hmm. Now, live that life. Yeah. Lead that career.
Yeah, I love it. We have a question from Antoine. Hi, Stephen. Why the importance of creating culture change through leadership behavior?
Why the importance of creating culture change through leadership behavior? And Antoine, if you're willing to join us and add more context to the question, or Bakari, how you're reading into it as well, I'd love to know more before I can answer or add to it.
Antoine, if you raise your hand, I can invite you on stage. So I'm going to keep my eye out so that you can raise your hand and we can bring you on stage and you can personally ask your question.
I can start if Antoine, you're comfortable to join us, great, but I can start riffing and see if we can get something valuable. So why the importance of creating culture change through leadership behavior? So it's kind of two questions. Why is it important to change our culture, or to evolve our culture, and how Do our behaviors as leaders help that? Perhaps. So one, I mean, I'm not a fan of change for change's sake. I think change needs to happen for a reason, and change has context. And so anytime we are proposing or creating change, we need to steep it in why it matters and how this change will help us be more successful as an organization in advancing our cause. I believe every single organization, I heard Kara say that she was part of a for impact organization. Love that, Kara. But every organization has the opportunity to be either for profit or for impact, and for purpose and not for purpose. I'm a believer that we should be for purpose, which allows people to feel engaged, give of their discretionary effort to advance a worthwhile cause. So anytime we make change, I think we need to steep it into how does this organizational change actually help us better advance the very purpose and cause of our organization, which is not more profits, which is not sell more widgets. That's self-interested. Nobody wakes up to make you more money. People wake up for meaning, to use their strengths to contribute to something worthwhile, to solve a human need. And hopefully your product and service is a vehicle to help solve that human problem. And then leadership behavior, so goes the leader, so goes the organization. There are a few sort of truths as leaders. One is, as a leader, a whisper is a shout, let's say someone calls my office and my assistant, I don't have an assistant, but my assistant says, hey, Shed, Bakari's on the phone for you. And I go, tell him I'm not here. I've just said that everyone in this organization can lie, because I just did. Yeah. And this is to your previous question on bridge the culture gap as well, which is, I know, the intent of the session. More senior you get, the further away you get from the truth. Yeah. Because we're a hierarchical species, and it's like if you see Steven Spielberg walking down the street and he's holding like 2 briefcases, you offer to open the door, you offer to hold the briefcase for him, and it is an honor, right, and a privilege. We offer our authorities deference because we have to. We offer leaders deference because we want to. And so this is the old, don't just do as I say, do as I do, lead by example. And so change needs context, and then you have to choose to be the leader you wish you had. You have to display the behaviors that you expect others to do. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, as we wrap up here, I know you recommended the book, Turn the Ship Around.
Yes.
Can you wrap this up for us with final thoughts, maybe a charge as well, and a book recommendation for
to match that
time.
Charge? Yeah.
For this time.
Yeah. I mean, this time more than ever, I think, has taught us that we need each other. We need each other. The experience that we've been through, regardless of who you are, you've experienced some sort of trauma. Perhaps that trauma happened immediately. Perhaps that trauma happened after, if you're a type A personality, kind of like me, it didn't happen immediately, because as soon as COVID hit, I was in save my company mode. I was in, what do we need to do to mobilize to create the future? Because if we don't create the future, we no longer can advance our cause at this organization. And so I was in save the company mode. And so for some of us, trauma hits immediately, or it hits 4 or 5 months later, but it's all hit us at some point. And when trauma hits us, we need relationships. We need, when all of a sudden we're procrastinating, we're not ourselves, we're losing sleep, we're antisocial, we need to pick up the phone and just say, I'm not me. I'm not okay. I just need you to know that, because I need someone who cares about me more than I care about myself right now. And if we don't have that, that's scary. And that can lead to serious issues of potentially us giving up on ourselves. And when we give up on ourselves, we make mistakes. And so I think what this time has taught us is that in a really intense way, whether it's by phone, FaceTime, Zoom, distanced walk, whatever, we need each other. We need each other. And so a book I would hugely recommend is Give and Take by Adam Grant. Give and Take by Adam Grant is brilliant. It shows you how you can be as we are biologically wired to be, which is animals who look out for each other. What has made the Homo sapiens successful is not that we're fast or strong, because we're not. It's that we can form bonds of trust and cooperation. We would go out into the field and all of a sudden a saber-toothed tiger would eat us. But as soon as we traveled as a pack, they learned, okay, I'll wait until one of them slows down or they're going solo. We are very good as teams. We are very good together. And so Adam Grant has written a brilliant book that has showed how you can both be a service-oriented giver and be successful. You don't need to be a martyr. You can actually give and have that giving be the key part of your success.
Shed, giving, you just gave us what I consider to be the most valuable commodity any of us can possess, and that is time. And I thank you for that. And again, the revolving message is we need each other. So let's go out and let's make a difference. And with that, this is the end of the session. Thank you all so very much.